A cold March rain softened the lights of Seattle into blurred ribbons across the windows of Alder and Pine, an elegant restaurant tucked into Capitol Hill. Megan Sullivan adjusted her apron and glanced toward the dining room. The Thursday crowd had thinned, and she was already calculating her tips, wondering whether there would be enough left after groceries and bus fare to buy the colored pencils Sophie had been admiring at the school supply store. Sophie was 6 years old and drew constantly. Their small apartment in White Center was crowded with pictures of impossible gardens, purple dogs, castles in the clouds, and families holding hands beneath enormous suns. Megan had worked at Alder and Pine for 2 years. She knew which customers disliked conversation, which wanted recommendations, and which treated servers as though they were invisible. The man at the corner table belonged to none of those categories. He appeared most evenings around 9 o'clock, always alone, usually carrying a laptop. He was about 35, wore expensive but understated suits, and ordered mushroom risotto often enough that the kitchen staff joked about naming it after him. That night, half the meal remained untouched. "Everything all right?" Megan asked. He closed his laptop. "Perfect. I think I was too distracted to appreciate it." His gray-green eyes looked unusually tired. After a hesitation, he asked, "How long have you worked here?" "About 2 years." "Do you like it?" "It pays the bills." Something about her answer made him smile. "Family?" Megan normally guarded her private life, yet his question carried no flirtation. "One daughter, Sophie. She's 6. Her face brightened automatically. "You must be proud of her." "Every day." He looked at the unfinished risotto, then back at Megan. "I never caught your name." "Megan Sullivan." "Ryan. Ryan Mercer." It was the first personal thing he had told her despite months of being a regular customer. Near midnight, Megan finished cleaning and walked to the bus stop. The rain had stopped, leaving wet pavement shining beneath street lamps. A rideshare would have brought her home sooner, but the cost could buy breakfast for several mornings. Sophie was sleeping at their neighbor Carol's apartment until Megan returned. On the bus, Megan allowed herself the dangerous luxury of imagining another life. She had once studied education at a community college, hoping to become an elementary school teacher. Pregnancy had interrupted that dream. Sophie's father had disappeared soon after learning about the baby, and survival had replaced ambition. Still, Megan kept telling herself that unfinished dreams were not necessarily dead ones. The following evening, Alder and Pine was packed. Shortly after 10:30, Megan saw Ryan at his usual table. "You remembered," he said when she brought water without being asked. "Occupational hazard." Ryan looked toward the crowded room. "Do you ever wonder whether people really see one another?" Megan laughed softly. "That sounds serious for someone waiting for risotto." "Business does that to you." "So that's what you do?" "Business. Meetings. Decisions. Too many numbers." For the first time, Megan heard bitterness beneath his calm voice. Later, when Ryan left, most of his meal remained. Robert, the restaurant manager, shook his head as Megan collected the plate. "Rich people." Megan stared at the untouched food. It cost more than she earned in hours. The following morning, Sophie woke with a fever. By afternoon, she was improving, but the refrigerator contained little more than bread, milk, and 1 egg. Megan scrambled the egg and divided it between them. "I'm still hungry," Sophie whispered. Megan smiled despite the ache in her chest. "We'll make toast too." That evening at work, Ryan again left half his dinner. Megan stood beside his table longer than necessary. "Ryan, can I ask something strange?" "Of course." Her courage nearly failed. "You usually leave food behind." He looked at his plate. "I suppose I do." Megan lowered her voice. "Could I take what's left home for my daughter?" Ryan became completely still. Megan immediately regretted asking. "She isn't starving," she added quickly. "I take care of her. Things just get tight sometimes, especially near the end of the month." Forget I said anything. Megan. She stopped. Please take it. His expression held no judgment. Then he called the server passing nearby. And could the kitchen prepare another meal to go? Megan shook her head. Ryan, no. What does Sophie like? You don't have to do this. I know. His answer was quiet. What does she like? Megan swallowed. Lasagna. Then tomorrow Sophie gets lasagna. Her eyes filled. Why? Ryan looked around the beautiful restaurant, at plates being cleared and glasses being polished. Because you just reminded me that something I've been treating as ordinary might mean everything to somebody else. That night, Sophie sat at their tiny kitchen table, eating mushroom risotto from a restaurant container. This is fancy, she announced. Megan laughed. Watching her daughter eat, Megan thought about Ryan's silence before answering her request. She had expected embarrassment. Instead, for one strange moment, the wealthy stranger had looked as though Megan had given something to him. She had no idea that the simple question she had nearly been too ashamed to ask had opened a door neither of them would ever be able to close. On Monday afternoon, Ryan appeared earlier than usual and asked specifically for Megan. Caleb, another server, raised his eyebrows. Your mystery businessman is waiting. He's a customer. Sure. Megan ignored him and approached Ryan's table. How is Sophie? The fact that he remembered her daughter's name touched her more than she wanted to admit. Back at school. Good. Ryan opened his briefcase and removed a wooden case. For her. Inside were artist-grade colored pencils in dozens of shades, including metallic gold and silver. Megan immediately closed the box. I can't take this. Why? Because those probably cost more than my grocery budget. They're pencils, Megan. They're expensive pencils. Ryan leaned back. You said she draws constantly. Megan stared at him. I don't remember telling you that. You did. When? The first night we actually talked. He smiled faintly. I remember important things. Before Megan could answer, Robert approached. Megan, another table has been waiting. Ryan's expression changed. She'll be there in a moment. Robert stiffened. Sir, I'm the manager. Then manage respectfully. Megan felt both grateful and embarrassed. After Robert left, she whispered, I can defend myself. I know. Ryan's voice softened. But capable people deserve support too. That evening, Sophie's reaction to the pencils erased Megan's hesitation. There are so many. She tested each color carefully, and then began drawing. Who gave them to you? A friend from work. Sophie studied her mother. Do you like him? Megan laughed. Why would you ask that? Because you're smiling without knowing it. During the next 2 evenings, Ryan didn't appear. By Thursday, Megan found herself watching the entrance far too often. He finally arrived, soaked by rain and looking exhausted. Long week? She asked. Long life. Megan brought him a towel from the kitchen. Sophie made something for you. She unfolded a drawing. 3 figures stood beneath a rainbow. A woman, a little girl, and a tall man in a suit. Ryan stared at it. She put me with you. She calls you the kind man from the restaurant. Something flickered across Ryan's face. He folded the paper carefully and placed it inside his jacket. Can I ask about Sophie's father? Megan's shoulders tightened. He left before she was born. Said he wasn't ready. I'm sorry. Don't be. We survived. Ryan nodded. Surviving can still be exhausting. You sound like you understand. His laugh held no humor. Money solves certain problems. It doesn't solve all of them. His phone rang. Ryan Mercer, he answered. Megan listened as his voice became authoritative. No, move the meeting to tomorrow. Tell the board I've made the decision. When he hung up, she raised an eyebrow. Your mysterious business sounds important. Ryan rubbed his forehead. Sometimes I feel like my life belongs to everyone except me. Megan understood that feeling in a different way. If you could choose another life, what would you choose? He asked. She thought of classrooms, children's books, construction paper stars. I'd finish my education degree. I'd teach, maybe help children whose parents are struggling the way I do. You studied education. For 2 years. Why didn't you finish? Sophie came along. Tuition, childcare, work. Life happened. Would you go back? With what money? Ryan became quiet. Finally, he said, "What if money weren't the problem?" It is the problem. What if it didn't have to be? Megan narrowed her eyes. Ryan, what are you talking about? He inhaled slowly. There is something I should have told you. The seriousness in his voice frightened her. My full name is Ryan Mercer, Mercer Dynamics. Megan recognized the company immediately. It was a major technology corporation headquartered in Seattle, frequently mentioned in financial news. Ryan continued. My family founded it. I'm the chief executive. Megan stared at him. You're that Ryan Mercer? Unfortunately. One of the richest businessmen in the state, and, depending on the week, one of the loneliest. Suddenly, every detail made sense. The suits, the phone calls, Robert's instinctive retreat. Why hide it? Because here nobody cared. I could eat dinner without being pitched an investment or introduced to someone's daughter. His gaze held hers. Then you noticed me, but not because of my name. Megan sank into the chair opposite him. And what does any of this have to do with my college? Mercer Foundation funds scholarships. I want you to apply through the program. Tuition, books, whatever support qualifies under the scholarship. No favors? No debt to me. No conditions. Why me? Ryan touched the folded drawing inside his jacket. Because the night you asked for leftovers, I saw someone protecting her dignity while doing whatever was necessary for her child, and I realized I've spent years approving charitable budgets without knowing a single person behind the numbers. His voice dropped. You made those numbers human again. Megan returned home, unable to sleep. She had thought Ryan was simply a lonely businessman. Instead, he possessed enough wealth to change lives with a signature. And somehow he believed hers was worth changing. Carol was nearly 65 and had lived across the hall since before Megan and Sophie moved into the building. The next morning, she took one look at Megan and handed her coffee. Something happened. Why does everyone keep reading my face? Because your face has never learned to lie. Megan told her enough to explain the scholarship without mentioning every detail. Carol listened silently. A wealthy man wants to help you finish school? Yes. And you trust him? Megan hesitated. Yes. Then your real fear isn't the scholarship. Megan looked away. Carol smiled. You care about him. At work that evening, Ryan sat at his usual table without a laptop. Megan slid into the chair across from him during her break. I have questions. All of them. Why this restaurant? Because I can disappear here. You didn't disappear. No. Ryan smiled. You treated me like a person. That's rarer than you'd think. And the scholarship? Real. Pity? Never. What then? Admiration. The word unsettled her more deeply than generosity would have. Megan studied him. You're falling in love with me. Ryan blinked. For once, the powerful executive had no immediate answer. Yes, he finally said. Megan's heartbeat thundered. I think I'm falling in love with you too. Neither moved for several seconds. Then Ryan reached across the table, and Megan allowed her hand to rest in his. The warmth of it frightened her. You could date anyone, she whispered. Women who understand your world. Women with advanced degrees and families like yours. I don't want anyone. You don't understand what happens if this goes badly. I have Sophie. I know. No, Ryan. If you decide someday that playing ordinary was entertaining and return to your real life, I don't get to walk away alone. A little girl gets hurt too. His face grew serious. My world can be cruel. You're right to consider that. Then you understand why I'm afraid. Yes. The weekend passed slowly. Sophie eventually asked, "Does the kind man make you happy?" Megan paused while brushing her daughter's hair. Yes. Then why do you look sad? Because sometimes people who care about each other live very different lives. Like Cinderella? Megan laughed. Something like that. But Cinderella still went. Children, Megan thought, had a frightening ability to simplify what adults complicated. For several days, Ryan disappeared on business trips to Los Angeles and New York. When he returned, he ordered only coffee. "I've been thinking," he said. "So have I. You were right. Our lives are very different." Although Megan had said those words first, hearing him repeat them hurt. "I came to say goodbye." She stared at him. "I think staying away might protect you and Sophie." Ryan placed a business card on the table. "The scholarship opportunity remains. My assistant has the information. It has nothing to do with whatever happens between us." Megan picked up the card. "And what if I don't want the foundation's Ryan Mercer?" He looked confused. "What if I want the man who comes here late, leaves half his risotto, and pretends nobody knows who he is?" Ryan stared at her. Megan's voice trembled. "I spent days thinking I was protecting Sophie by refusing anything uncertain. But what am I teaching her if fear makes every decision for me? Megan! I can't promise this will work. I can't even promise I won't panic again." She stood before him. "But I know losing something real because I was afraid would haunt me longer than trying." Ryan rose. "One day at a time?" One day at a time. Their relationship began quietly. No extravagant vacations, no jewelry, no photographers. After Megan's shifts, they drank coffee in neighborhood bakeries or walked beneath wet Seattle trees. Ryan spoke about board meetings and investors. Megan spoke about overdue bills, Sophie's school projects, and customers who left generous tips or cruel remarks. They discovered that their lives were different, but their exhaustion was strangely similar. One Saturday, Ryan asked to meet Sophie properly. "Not as your boyfriend," he quickly clarified. "Just Ryan." They arranged to meet at Green Lake. Sophie arrived carrying another drawing. "Thank you for my pencils." "You're welcome." "I drew flowers because Mom said you like flowers." Megan stared at Sophie. She had never said that. Ryan accepted the drawing solemnly. "I do now." The three spent the morning feeding ducks and walking around the lake. When Sophie stumbled and scraped her knee, Ryan immediately crouched beside her, cleaned it with a tissue and water, and distracted her with a ridiculous story about a duck running for mayor. On the bus home, Sophie announced, "I like him. I noticed." "He likes you. How do you know?" "Because he looks at you the way you look at me." That night, Megan received a message from Ryan, thanking her for letting him share their morning. She stared at his words before replying. She had spent years believing strength meant needing nobody. Perhaps strength could also mean choosing carefully whom to trust. The fragile peace lasted only a few weeks. One Monday, Robert summoned Megan into his office. "You're a good employee," he began. Megan immediately knew something unpleasant would follow. "But people are talking about you, and one of our customers." "What people?" "Staff, guests. Apparently you've been seen with Ryan outside work." Megan folded her arms. "And? This restaurant has standards." "So do I." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Some people think you may be taking advantage of a wealthy customer." The insult landed harder than Megan expected. "In 2 years, have I ever stolen?" "No." "Been inappropriate with customers?" "No." "Missed shifts without explanation?" "No." "Then judge my work by my work." Robert sighed. "Just be discreet." Megan left furious. When Ryan arrived later, he knew instantly something was wrong. They met afterward at a small bakery down the street. "I'll talk to Robert," Ryan said after hearing the story. "No. He has no right. Please don't solve this by intimidating my manager." Then quit. Megan stared at him. "What?" "Go back to school. The scholarship can cover—" "No." Ryan stopped. "I won't leave my job and become financially dependent on you. That isn't what I meant. Maybe not consciously, but you can remove problems by writing checks or making calls. I can't build my life that way." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I hate watching people disrespect you. Then stand beside me while I handle it." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Ryan nodded. "You're right." 2 days later, gossip became worse. Megan overheard customers whispering that Ryan was secretly married and she was his mistress. That evening she told him, "Hiding us is feeding this. What do you suggest? Introduce me to your family." Ryan visibly paled. "My family is exactly why I've been trying to protect you." Being hidden doesn't feel like protection. He looked away. "My mother is hosting dinner Sunday. Then I'll go." "Megan, you don't know Helen Mercer." "No, but I know myself." Sunday evening, Ryan picked Megan up outside her apartment. She wore a navy dress purchased on clearance years earlier. Carol watched Sophie and gave Megan one final instruction. "Head up, nobody's bank account makes them taller." Ryan's family home stood on Mercer Island, behind tall gates and carefully landscaped gardens. "This is absurd," Megan whispered as they approached the enormous house. "I warned you." "No. You described a house. This has columns." Despite her nerves, Ryan laughed. His mother met them in the foyer. Helen Mercer was around 60, silver-haired, elegant, and composed with the confidence of someone who had rarely entered a room without controlling it. "This is Megan Sullivan," Ryan said. Helen's gaze moved from Megan's shoes to her dress. "How did you meet?" "At Alder and Pine." "You work there?" "Yes." "Doing what?" "I'm a server." The silence answered for Helen. At dinner, Megan met Ryan's younger brother Richard, his wife Patricia, and a cousin named Faith with her husband Ethan. The conversation drifted through private schools, European vacations, investment funds, and people Megan had only seen in newspapers. Patricia eventually asked, "Who designed your dress?" "A department store, I suppose." Faith suppressed a smile. Later, Helen asked about education. "I studied elementary education, but left before graduating." "How unfortunate," Helen replied. "Education matters tremendously." "I agree. That's why I'm returning." Then came the question Megan had expected. "You have a child?" "Sophie. She's 6. "And her father?" Ryan started to interrupt. Megan stopped him gently. "He chose not to participate in her life. I raise her." Patricia offered a sympathetic expression that felt insulting. "That must be difficult without proper resources." Megan placed her fork down. "My daughter has proper resources. She has love, stability, boundaries, education, and a mother who shows up." Helen cut into her meal calmly. "Financial stability is also valuable." Ryan's chair moved sharply. "Enough." Everyone froze. "You invited Megan into this house, and have spent the entire evening measuring her against your money." "Ryan," Helen warned. "No. You want to understand my choice? I chose a woman who works harder than anyone at this table, raises a remarkable child, and still treats strangers with dignity." Megan touched his arm. "Ryan." Then she looked directly at Helen. "Thank you for dinner. And thank you for making things very clear." She walked out with her head high. Ryan followed. "I'll take you home." "No. Megan, don't let them decide this. They already matter, Ryan. They're your family. You matter more. But how many years can you fight them because of me?" "As many as necessary." Megan's eyes filled. "And how many years can I live knowing every holiday becomes a war Because I walked into your life. For the first time, Ryan had no answer. Megan kissed his cheek. Then she left alone, wondering whether courage had brought her toward happiness, or simply made the inevitable heartbreak arrive sooner. For the next week, Megan avoided Ryan. He called, sent messages, and came to Alder and Pine once, but she asked Caleb to serve his table. Sophie noticed immediately. "Did you and Ryan fight?" "We're thinking." "Adults think too much." Megan nearly smiled. On Thursday, Robert called her into his office again. This time it isn't gossip. "What happened?" "A lawyer phoned asking questions about you. Employment history, behavior, personal circumstances." Megan's stomach tightened. "Who?" He wouldn't say. The answer arrived the following afternoon in an envelope placed beneath her apartment door. Inside were photographs. Her apartment building. Sophie playing outside. Megan walking home after work. There was also a letter from Helen Mercer. Its language was polished and almost courteous. That made it worse. Helen acknowledged that Megan worked hard, but argued that Ryan's relationship with her would damage both lives. She offered Megan and Sophie a better apartment, private schooling for Sophie through college, and financial security. The condition was simple. Megan must disappear permanently from Ryan's life. She read the letter repeatedly. Everything she had ever wanted for Sophie had been placed before her. A safe neighborhood, excellent schools, opportunities, no worrying about groceries during the final week of the month. No choosing between bus fare and colored pencils. Megan looked out the window. Sophie was laughing with neighborhood children, chasing a ball across the shared courtyard. For several minutes, Megan hated herself for hesitating. Was a good mother supposed to sacrifice everything? If she could trade her own happiness for Sophie's future, wasn't refusing selfish? Then Sophie spotted her. "Mom, come outside!" Her face was bright and completely trusting. Something inside Megan settled. Helen's offer assumed Sophie lacked the most important thing because Megan lacked money. But Sophie had never doubted whether she was loved. Megan called Ryan. He answered immediately. "Megan, I need to see you." They met at Green Lake on the same bench where Sophie had given Ryan her drawing. Megan handed him the letter. Ryan's face hardened as he read. "She investigated you. She thinks she's protecting you. This isn't protection. She offered Sophie everything I can't." Ryan looked at her. "In exchange for your happiness. In exchange for her future." He sat beside her. "Do you really believe Sophie needs a miserable mother to have a good future?" Megan's composure broke. "You don't understand what it's like to count dollars before buying milk." "No, I don't." Ryan didn't defend himself. "But I understand what it's like to grow up surrounded by everything money buys and still watch people make themselves miserable protecting status." Megan wiped her eyes. "Maybe your mother is right that our worlds don't fit." Ryan stood. "After you left dinner, she told me I had to choose." Megan's heart sank. "And?" "I chose." Ryan reached into his coat. "I told her I would rather build a life I believe in than inherit one chosen for me." He took out a small ring box. Megan stared. "Ryan, I know this looks insane. It is insane." "Probably." He knelt in front of her. "Megan Sullivan, you taught me that generosity means nothing if you never see the person you're helping. You taught me that dignity isn't something money grants. You made me want to become someone Sophie could respect." He opened the box. The ring was elegant but restrained. "I don't expect you to depend on me. I don't want to rescue you. I want to build beside you." Megan shook her head, overwhelmed. "Your family could cut you off." "Then I'll discover whether I've learned anything after all these years." "What if we're wrong?" Ryan smiled. "What if we're right?" Megan imagined Sophie years from now asking why her mother had walked away. What answer could she give? That she had been afraid of people with bigger houses? that she had mistaken sacrifice for love, that she taught her daughter to chase dreams while abandoning her own. Are you absolutely sure? I've never been more sure. Megan breathed deeply. Yes. Ryan blinked. Yes? Yes, Ryan. I'll marry you. When she returned home and told Sophie, the little girl screamed with joy. Does that mean Ryan will be my dad? Megan pulled her close. It means someone who loves us wants to become part of our family. Sophie frowned. We're already a family. Megan laughed through tears. Yes, we're already a family. We'll just become a bigger one. Under Sophie's pillow that night lay the old drawing of 3 figures beneath a rainbow. For the first time, what the child had imagined no longer seemed impossible. The engagement did not magically erase the differences between their worlds. Helen stopped speaking to Ryan for months. Certain business acquaintances treated Megan like a curiosity. Online gossip briefly turned the restaurant server marrying a technology executive into entertainment for strangers who knew nothing about either of them. Megan refused interviews. She also refused Ryan's suggestion that she stop working immediately. Instead, she reduced her restaurant hours after being accepted into the Mercer Foundation scholarship program through its regular review process. At Megan's insistence, Ryan removed himself entirely from the decision. If I qualify, she told him. And if I don't, then we'll find another way. She qualified. Returning to college frightened Megan more than meeting Ryan's family had. She was older than many classmates, had forgotten how to write academic papers, and often studied after Sophie fell asleep. A professor named Dr. Amelia Brooks noticed Megan lingering after lectures and encouraged her to join a tutoring initiative at a nearby elementary school. You understand children who arrive carrying adult worries, Amelia told her. That can't be taught from textbooks. Megan began volunteering there. Meanwhile, Ryan made changes of his own. At Mercer Dynamics, employees were used to hearing him discuss efficiency, expansion, and revenue. Now he began asking different questions. Who actually used the company's community programs? Why were scholarship recipients represented only as statistics? Why did hourly employees lack childcare support while executives received enormous bonuses? Some board members complained that Ryan had become sentimental. He disagreed. I've become specific, he said. When people had names, it became harder to hide indifference behind spreadsheets. Helen eventually learned about those changes through company reports. Her first meeting with Megan, after the engagement occurred, unexpectedly, at a foundation event. Helen approached while Megan was helping scholarship students register. You're really going back to school? Yes. I assumed Ryan's money would make that unnecessary. Megan looked at her calmly. Ryan's money can make many things easier. It cannot become my identity. Helen's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. And Sophie? Still drawing. Helen glanced toward Ryan, who was kneeling beside Sophie, while the child explained an elaborate picture. He seems different with her. He is himself with her. Helen said nothing more. The wedding was intentionally small. Carol sat in the front row with Sophie. Caleb attended. And even Robert came, awkwardly offering Megan an apology for how quickly he had believed gossip. Helen attended too. She did not embrace Megan or suddenly become warm, but before the ceremony, she approached Sophie with a wrapped package. Inside was a leather art portfolio. My mother gave me one when I was a child, Helen said. I used to paint. Sophie stared at her. Why did you stop? Helen seemed surprised by the question. I became busy. You should start again. For once, Helen Mercer had no prepared response. Years passed. Megan completed her education degree and became an elementary school teacher. Later, she helped develop a support program for working parents returning to college. Sophie grew into a confident teenager who still loved art. Ryan remained wealthy, busy, and imperfect. He still forgot meals during stressful weeks. Megan still reminded him that leaving expensive food untouched was ridiculous. Their life contained arguments, difficult family dinners, missed appointments, and the ordinary disappointments that fairy tales leave out. But it also contained something Megan had never expected when she first carried that container of leftover risotto home. Partnership. Ryan never became the man who rescued Megan. Megan never became the woman who saved Ryan. Instead, each challenged the other to become braver. And slowly, even Helen changed. Not dramatically, not overnight, but enough. She began visiting Sophie. She returned to painting. Eventually, she funded art programs in public schools without attaching the Mercer name to every classroom. One winter afternoon, years after their first meeting, Megan found Helen studying Sophie's earliest drawing. 3 figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. "I was wrong about you," Helen said. Megan looked at her. "About many things." Helen nodded. "I thought security was something money could guarantee." "And now?" Helen looked toward the kitchen, where Ryan and Sophie were arguing cheerfully about dinner. "Now I think money can build walls just as easily as it builds homes." Megan understood. The woman who once offered to purchase her departure had finally learned what Megan herself had discovered in the hardest years of motherhood. A good life was not measured only by what could be provided. It was also measured by what one refused to surrender. Years later, after Sophie had left for college and Megan's hair had begun showing silver near her temples, she returned one rainy evening to Alder and Pine. The restaurant had changed owners. The furniture was different, and the old corner table had been replaced, but rain still slid down the windows exactly as it had on the night she first spoke honestly to Ryan. They sat together after dinner. Ryan pushed his plate toward her. "You're staring at my food again. You still waste food." "I ate most of it." "Most isn't all." He laughed. Across the room, a young server quietly wrapped untouched bread and food from another table after receiving permission from the kitchen manager. Megan watched her carefully. For an instant, she saw herself again. Tired feet, aching pride, a child waiting at home, and the constant arithmetic of survival. Ryan noticed. "You're thinking about that night." "How could I not?" One question had changed everything. Yet with age, Megan had learned that the question itself had never contained magic. Ryan's wealth had not created the miracle. Neither had romance. The real turning point had been honesty. For years, Megan had believed dignity meant never admitting need. She thought a strong mother should quietly solve every problem, accept every exhaustion, and reveal nothing that might invite judgment. But hunger did not disappear because she was proud. Tuition did not become affordable because she remained silent. Loneliness did not become wisdom simply because Ryan disguised it behind a tailored suit. They had both been trapped by appearances in different ways. Megan had been ashamed of having too little. Ryan had been tired of having so much that people no longer knew where his money ended, and he began. Their lives met when both stopped pretending. Age had taught Megan something else as well. Sacrifice was not automatically noble. For many years she had treated her own dreams as expendable because she was a mother. She would have gladly abandoned education, companionship, rest, even love, if someone convinced her Sophie benefited from the loss. But children learn not only from what parents give them, they learn from what parents believe they deserve. If Megan had accepted Helen's offer and disappeared, Sophie might have received better schools and a larger home, yet she would also have watched her mother teach a quieter lesson. That fear should choose your future, that powerful people may determine your worth, and that love becomes irresponsible whenever it crosses social boundaries. Instead, Sophie had watched something harder. She watched Megan keep working when easier dependence was available. She watched Ryan learn that helping someone did not mean controlling them. She watched Helen discover that wealth could protect a family while prejudice could poison one. She watched adults apologize, change, and begin again. That, Megan eventually understood, was one of the greatest gifts older people can leave the young. Not the illusion that good people never make mistakes, but proof that mistakes do not have to become permanent character. Money mattered. Megan would never romanticize poverty after knowing what an empty refrigerator felt like. Security mattered. Education mattered. Opportunity mattered. But none of those things could replace respect. Real kindness did not stand above another person and announce, "I know what is best for you." It sat beside them and asked, "What do you need, and how can I help without taking your choices away?" Real love behaved similarly. It was not rescue. It was not possession. It was not one person becoming smaller so another could feel strong. It was two people protecting each other's freedom while choosing, again and again, to walk in the same direction. Ryan reached across the table and took Megan's hand. Outside, Seattle shimmered beneath the rain. Megan remembered the young woman who once boarded a late bus with leftover risotto in her bag, ashamed that life had become difficult enough to make her ask. If she could speak to that younger version of herself now, she would tell her not to lower her head. Need was not failure. Receiving kindness was not weakness. Starting again was not foolish. And a person's value had never been measured by the neighborhood where she lived, the job printed beneath her name, the balance in her account, or the opinions of people seated at expensive tables. Sometimes a life changed because someone offered help. Sometimes because someone dared to accept it. And sometimes everything began with a tired mother, gathering enough courage to ask whether food, destined for the trash, might instead be carried home to the daughter she loved. Sophie was well into adulthood when she finally asked Megan something she had never considered before. They were sitting on the back porch of Megan and Ryan's home outside Seattle on a mild autumn afternoon. Sophie had come home carrying a portfolio filled with illustrations from the children's book she was preparing to publish. "Mom, do you ever wish things had happened differently?" Megan smiled. "Which things?" "The hard years, Dad leaving, the restaurant, Grandma Helen, all of it." Megan considered the question. There were wounds she would never pretend had been blessings. She would never tell a struggling young mother that poverty existed to teach character, or that abandonment somehow made people stronger. Some suffering was simply suffering. If she could have spared Sophie the nights when groceries ran low, she would have done so without hesitation. "No," Megan finally said. "But I wish I had understood sooner what those years eventually taught me." Sophie waited. Megan had lived long enough to know that people often spent the first half of life trying to prove themselves, and the second half discovering how little proof was actually necessary. Young adults worried about appearing successful. Parents worried about giving children everything. Wealthy families feared losing status. Poor families feared being judged for lacking it. Everyone became so busy defending an image that they sometimes forgot to live inside their own lives. She had learned that dignity was quieter than pride. Pride once told Megan never to ask for help. Dignity taught her to accept help without surrendering responsibility. Pride told Ryan that his money could repair every problem. Dignity taught him to stand beside another person without taking control. Pride told Helen that protecting her family justified deciding who belonged in it. Age eventually taught Helen that love forced through fear was not protection at all. Megan also understood now that children rarely remember life according to the categories adults obsess over. Sophie remembered the tiny apartment, but not as a symbol of poverty. She remembered drawing at the kitchen table. She remembered Carol making pancakes. She remembered eating restaurant lasagna from a takeout box and thinking it was the greatest meal in Seattle. What had seemed inadequate to Megan had still contained love. That did not mean people should stop seeking better lives. Megan remained proud of every class she completed, every paycheck earned, every scholarship created, and every opportunity Sophie received. But improvement and shame were different things. A person could want a larger home without despising the small one that sheltered them. They could seek education without believing the absence of a degree made them stupid. They could become wealthy without treating people with less money as unfinished versions of themselves. And they could accept love without first becoming someone society considered more deserving of it. Megan looked at Sophie, now older than Megan had been when she first carried those leftovers home. "The hardest lesson," she said, "was understanding that loving you didn't require me to disappear." Sophie frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "For years I thought being a good mother meant giving up anything I wanted, if it might benefit you. But children don't need parents who erase themselves. They need parents who show them how to live with courage, responsibility, kindness, and self-respect." Sophie leaned her head against Megan's shoulder. From inside the house came Ryan's voice, complaining that nobody had helped him prepare dinner properly. Megan laughed. Some things never changed. She rose slowly and looked once more at her daughter. A lifetime had passed since that rainy night in the restaurant, yet the truth remained remarkably simple. People could lose money and rebuild it. Careers could change. Homes could be left behind. Social approval could disappear overnight. But the moments when one human being truly saw another, without status, without judgment, without calculation, became part of both lives forever. And perhaps that was why Megan no longer thought of her story as a tale about a poor waitress and a wealthy executive. It was about two people who met while carrying different kinds of hunger. One needed enough courage to ask. The other needed enough humility to listen. Everything beautiful that followed began there.